start. Yeah, so the title, Spiritual Death, Who Dies, I came up with before I'd quite finished preparing what I was going to say, but it does seem to fit actually, usefully. So, yeah, what's been got at with this term spiritual death, and why am I talking about it here at Meditation Life? You've come along to learn to meditate. Well, broadly speaking, with meditation, we're trying to grow and develop, aren't we? We're developing mindfulness, deepening mindfulness. We're developing metta. Metta is the practice we're going to do today. Metta being the Pali term for loving kindness. So, broadly speaking, with meditation, we're trying to sort of develop ourselves, and that's a very, very helpful way to kind of think about what we're doing, what meditation can do. It helps you grow as a human being. On Saturdays, we've been following the logic of a teaching of the 5 essential ingredients, we've called them, for human growth. And spiritual death is one of those. It's a bit of a googly. It throws, to use a cricketing term, it throws you a googly. You're not quite expecting it because we're talking about development, growth and development. But there's something that gets in the way of growth and development. You always need a sort of a counteracting metaphor, because one metaphor is never sort of adequate to fully help you grow. You sort of get stuck in a metaphor. And the downside of growth and development, self-development, is that there is an aspect of our experience that gets in the way. There's an aspect of our experience that's often termed self. Now that's a bit kind of confusing, isn't it? We're talking about self-development, but then also self gets in the way. But what's been got at is kind of quite subtle, really. It's quite subtle. So don't worry if you're sort of slightly perplexed. That's quite reasonable. But what has been got at, you also know from your experience, if you've meditated for a bit, you know that experience where when you're meditating and you actually something starts to happen. You actually start to go deeper in your meditation. Thought starts to quieten and you start to get really concentrated, and then you go, ooh, it's working, I'm getting somewhere, and immediately you have that thought, you're taken out of that deeper state of concentration. You can't quite work out why, and you can't work out why you can't get back into it. I don't know if you've ever had that experience, either in meditation or outside of meditation. You're getting more concentrated, and then you go, ooh, this is great, and you're actually taken out of the concentration. So it's that, ooh, this is great, that spiritual death is getting at. There's something that we can call self that gets in the way of us deepening our lives, of us growing. So that's the value to this aspect of growth, this ingredient of growth called spiritual death. So as I say, it's quite subtle. You can think, oh God, spiritual death, I'm going to die, self is going to die, that means I'm going to die. It's not quite saying that. But what is interesting is this little sort of, ooh, I'm doing well, is actually really quite pernicious. It's something we're sort of almost addicted to, which is why it's hard to go deeper in anything, actually. If you're trying to go deeper in your life, you will encounter the need for what's been got at with the practice of spiritual death. So, what is it? What is it that dies? Who dies in spiritual death? Well, as I say, we're not dying, we're growing. In a way, what you could say is that what dies is habit. Actually, talking really sort of practically, it's sort of habit. That might surprise you, given I've given the example of this little thought that says, ooh, it's going well, I'm doing well. It doesn't sound like a habit, does it? But actually, That's what we encounter when we meditate. You know when you close your eyes and you meditate, and then all these thoughts come kind of streaming through your head. Well, they're all streaming through your head because they're habitual. You have been doing them in your life. You have been running those thoughts, running those stories, we call them, in your life. And you close your eyes, you sort of turn inwards, but actually the thoughts run on. That's because they're habitual. So much of our lives is very habitual. We end up sort of doing the same things again and again, don't we? We sort of repeat ourselves through life. It's a bit like life is a perpetual rehearsal. That's perhaps a sort of slightly confronting way of putting it, that we never actually get to the real thing. I mean that in the sense that if we want to deepen our lives, if we want to really sort of live from ourselves rather than just in an automatic, habitual kind of way, we need to sort of let go of this sort of rehearsal of self, rehearsal of the same sort of thoughts, the same sort of habitual actions that we generally do. So it's a bit confronting, this language, isn't it, of spiritual death. It sort of confronts us a little bit, and that's purposeful. When I was thinking about this, I thought of my great aunt, who is 102 this year, and I love spending time with her. She's from a different generation to me, and one of the things that really strikes me when I meet her is the nature of her attitudes towards people. Very, very noticeably different from the attitudes that I've grown up with towards people. Particularly noticeable when she's talking about someone who's been a bit off with her. She's been treated badly by someone she was talking to me about, and what was very, very striking was she didn't lose her appreciation for that person. And it was noticeable because it's different from the sort of world that I've grown up in. We have a kind of a sort of compensation sort of world, don't we, whereby if something goes wrong, if life treats you badly, well, where's the compensation? Of course, that's a financial thing, but in a certain way it gets into our minds. It's part of our culture to sort of think in that way, that in some ways life is sort of owed to you. And she was sort of talking about someone who sort of treated her badly, but she still felt that she benefited in some way from this person. I was very struck by that, quite sort of unusual attitude in the face of being sort of ill-treated. And it struck me because it contrasts with my general experience of our world. I feel like in a way our culture towards self these days is kind of quite cosseted, quite cosseting. We sort of look after self, we cherish self, we need to sort of consume more things to sort of shore up self. But what's striking about it is, with my great aunt, she's very, very robust. Very, very positive, robust woman, and it's because there isn't this sort of cosseting of self. Our culture, there's obvious sort of merits to we do need to sort of look after self. Kindness is incredibly important, but there's a sort of a subtle enemy to cosseting self that actually sort of holds us back. If we're a little bit too if we cosset self too much, we end up actually being less robust, oddly. We're sort of touchy and defensive all very easily. And I see that in myself as well. That's the sort of culture that I think we've grown up in. So because it's our culture, it's very difficult for us to see, but when you encounter someone from a different culture, like my aunt is, you see, oh gosh, actually, I'm kind of quite precious in a way about self. And the downsides of that is that it leads to a sort of lack of robustness. So she's able to sort of encounter difficulties, be badly treated, but still keep her appreciation for the human being who's done that towards her. We sort of tend, it's a generalisation, but in our culture I see a lot of sort of defensiveness, a lot of touchiness. So it's for this reason that it's hard for us to see self. It seems reasonable because our culture sort of reflects it back to us. But in all sorts of ways, we're habitually sort of acting in ways to sort of shore up self, to look after self. And we need, in a way, to have this sort of corrective teaching, this counterbalancing teaching of spiritual death. So what spiritual death's getting at is just actually kindly, but not going with your habits. Just noticing that you have a tendency to, whatever it is, sort of be the centre of attention, tendency to take things a bit personally or something like that. Tendency to just be a bit preoccupied with looking after self. You can see how, even with spiritual life, where you're trying to grow and develop self, you can see how subtly you can get self-preoccupied. So that's why we need this counterbalancing sort of emphasis on spiritual death. It's not about being rough with oneself. One can be kind, but actually not continue to act out of habit. So perhaps I need to say a little bit more about this point about habit. Because you might be thinking, well, there are positive habits, so why are we going against positive habits? But actually, whilst there are positive habits, the point about spiritual death is all of our habits are subtly sort of limiting. If we want to go deeper, we need to let go of our habits and really come into the present moment, come into life. You can see how that can't be habitual. Life arrives anew at every moment. So if we're going to live life in that sort of full way, we need to be prepared to let go of habits. So our habits are sort of us repeating ourselves through our lives. We've been talking about sort of rehearsal. It's like a rehearsal. It's like our lives are really rehearsal. We're not quite sort of living. So the way I'm going to suggest we approach this in the meditation is that actually, well, in a way, meditation itself is a stepping out of habit. That's essentially what we're trying to do in meditation. Of course, we don't always manage to do that. Often what we do is we close our eyes and we experience all our habits sort of running on into our meditation. And that's fine, that's what happens. But can you see how what we're trying to do is just take ourselves out of our lives, as it were, out of the habitual context that our habits shape and are then consequently shaped by. We take ourselves out of that context and just turn inwards and just be with ourselves. And it's in that moment that we can see those habits run on, but just seeing them is in a certain way stepping out of them. Yeah. So that's kind of something of the spirit of what we're doing in meditation. Next week I'm going to be going on solitary retreat. Just the sort of shock of solitude, being out of my habitual context. That's got a resonance with meditation. Every time we close our eyes, we're just sort of stopping. It's actually a sort of dedicated space, sort of precious space where we create in our lives to be non-habitual, to step out of habit. So that's really, really significant thing to do. And the way I'll suggest we go about doing this in the practice is just keep things really simple. All too easily, we can get a bit complicated with our practice. In a way, the sort of complexity, we can be actually coming from a habit of sort of trying to rearrange our experience in a way that suits us. Meditation isn't like that. Actually, experience isn't like that. We can't really rearrange experience. With meditation, we simply come back to what's actually happening. And that can be a shock. It can be a spiritual death. We've got this idea of who we are that we're carrying along, and we can carry it along as long as we don't come into contact with our experience in a very vivid way. With meditation, that's what we do. We come back into our experience, and that can be a shock to this habitual idea of self that we've been living through. So that's what we're going to do. We're just going to keep the practice really, really simple. We're going to be doing the Metta-Bhavana practice. If you haven't done that before, don't worry. I'll lead us through the practice. It's essentially a practice on loving kindness. So it's got other people in it. And we're just, as I say, going to keep it very, very simple so that we can just be kindly recognise our habitual thoughts, our habitual impulses, but kindly not go along with them. So that's got this sort of flavour of stepping out of the habitual. And it's subtle. This aspect of spiritual death is very subtle, but it's also very powerful. So that's what we'll do. So if you'd like to set yourselves up for meditation. So when you're ready, just closing your eyes. And as you close your eyes, we enter into this dedicated space, non-habitual space, stepping out of habit. That's what meditation practice is about. And it can just be a little shock, a little confrontation to self. It can be a mini death. So just letting thoughts be there as they are, noticing with kindness any habitual thoughts running on. Watching for any tendency to want to push them away. Just softening that if that happens. See if you can bring a bit more good humour to your experience. So feeling the sensations of the body. So where can you feel the body most vividly? Is it in the chest or the belly? Is it the contact with the ground? Where is it most vivid right now? And notice in that vividness, this direct, moment by moment, present moment experience. Notice how our direct physical experience anchors us in the present moment, takes us out of the repetition, the rehearsal of self. And then just perhaps wiggling your toes a little bit, just to intensify sensation there. Noticing Becoming aware of that direct sensation. And can you feel the sensation in the soles of your feet? Not trying too hard, not scrunching up furrowing your brow. Just letting the sensation be there, letting it present itself to your awareness. The tops of your feet. Just being patient and letting it, the sensation, arise. Don't need to do anything. And then what can you feel in your lower legs? Noticing this direct experience of sensation in the lower legs. Notice how it sort of shimmers, arises in the moment. And your thighs. So how is it with your eyes closed? You can be aware of your thighs. Noticing the sensation that tells you your thighs are there. And then just becoming aware of the rise and fall of the belly and torso. Feeling the contact of the skin with clothing as the belly rises and falls, and the chest. So in this practice, we're just going to bring our awareness into the experience of the heart center, in the center of the chest. So aware of the sensations of skin touching clothing in the chest, the center of the chest. And then aware of the sensations beneath the skin, right in the heart center, you can poetically call it. Noticing any sensation that's actually there. Might just be a strange sense of tension or a sort of amorphous sense of shape. And see if you can just rest your attention in these sensations. So there's something about the heart center that connects us with positive emotion. So we're just going to entrust our attention to those sensations. Don't worry if you get bored, that's what happens. That's just self-dying, our habits dying. Just staying with sensations in the heart center. attending to them with a kindly attention. Just having a sense of tenderness, of kindness in our attention to the sensations in the heart center. So this is the first stage of the metta bhavana. Just keeping it really simple. If there's thoughts running on, that's fine. Don't push them away. Just don't invest in them. Kindly, but quite clear that they're just habits. Let them die out under their own steam. We'll see if they will. Resting your attention in the sensations in the heart center. Don't worry if it's a bit uncomfortable, that's fine. That's all evoked by this term, spiritual death. Just keeping your attitude kind. Not underestimating the significance of what you're doing. There's something radical about the practice of meditation, about stepping out of the habitual. So radical it can be called spiritual death. And now, keeping your attention in the sensations of the heart center, resting your attention there. Also, bringing to mind a good friend, someone that you really appreciate, and you know that's mutual, they appreciate you. So don't spend too much time considering who, just choose. So you may just have a sense of them, or you may want to say their name very gently to bring them to mind, keeping your attention in the heart center. And just noticing what happens in the heart center, if there are any sort of flickers, of change. But just keeping it simple, resting your attention in the heart center. Don't worry if nothing's happening. This practice is subtle. So see if you can get a vivid sense of them, not trying too hard, just let them be there, whilst also resting your attention in the heart centre, sensations in the heart centre. Just keeping it simple. Not pushing thoughts away. But seeing them with good humour. It's just a habit of self running on. Simplicity of meditation exposes it, gives it no foothold to run on any further. And then we're going to jump to the fourth stage, where we bring to mind someone we find a bit difficult, uncomfortable to be around, not choosing your arch enemy, just someone who we feel a bit uncomfortable with, we don't like, they don't like us at the moment. And again, keeping our attention, continuing to attend to the heart centre. Usually with people we don't like, we go into our heads. See if you can stay in the body. Notice any habitual thoughts that arise about this person. Keep this good-humoured, kindly attitude towards those thoughts. Notice any discomfort in your experience with kindness. Just patiently, not habituating, not letting habits run on. See if you can just sit as a human being with this other human being. Don't worry if you're finding it difficult, of course, it might be. If you need to drop back to the friend stage for a bit of encouragement, then that's fine. now in the last stage, getting a sense both of our good friend and our current enemy or difficult person, and oneself. And see if you can notice any preference, and keep breathing into the heart center. Notice if there's anything deeper than preference, a solidarity with all life, the life in oneself, this person we like and this other person we don't like. And then we start to expand our awareness out to include more people in this awareness of other human beings. If you know people at meditation night, becoming aware of them, aware of them as other human beings just like us. All the time our attention in the heart center, keeping the practice really simple. Expanding your awareness out to more and more people as feels appropriate and genuine. And now as we come towards the end of the practice, dropping any effort that you're making and just sitting completely still, honouring this important stage of no effort. Where fruits of the practice can arise unexpectedly. So just taking the time to adjust out of the meditation to your environment around you. And if you've got any questions arising or any comments about your practice, how you found the practice, then now is the time. You just want to put them in the chat box. So I'll mention this particularly for George. We only did 3 of the stages, and there's 5 stages to the full practice, George. But keep coming along. Come along on Monday, actually Monday morning, and you'll get a dedicated introduction. I'm sure at the end we'll put the link for the Monday morning meditations in the chat box.
So actually, George has been saying that he's been going to the London Buddhist Centre while it's online, but he's based in Cambridge, so he's hoping to connect in with the local Buddhist centre. Yeah, so I think he probably knows Metta Bhavana.
Oh, good, all right.
Yeah, Arthasiddhi, I was just, when I was meditating just then, I found it so helpful actually to reflect on the habitual nature, my habitual nature, and how that sort of, it means that I just tend to think that I know who my friend is and I know who this difficult person is because of how I habitually think about them. But actually to drop those habits of mind, it means that suddenly they're a stranger. It's almost like they're a stranger to me.
Oh, yeah.
And that's quite exciting. There's so much that I don't know even about my good friend that I can become more receptive to if I sort of drop this kind of this habitual way of engaging.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Bidisaki. We sort of think we know our friends, and it's really interesting, isn't it? We think we know them because of their habits. Oh, that's just what he always does, that's proof that we know them. But it's odd because actually it's a sort of it's a rehearsing in a way. It's a sort of excuse for not being not being fully aware of our friend as they are now, because people are always sort of changing. Actually, if we really stop rehearsing our lives and actually sort of start living, we notice, just as you say, that actually there's so much more going on than what we habitually assume. It's quite as you say, quite thrilling, isn't it? But it's also chastening. I think this term spiritual death, I think it's well chosen. There's something of a shock. We can be so attached to our little habits and thoughts. It can be such a shock sometimes to see how difficult it is to stop our thoughts, how actually invested we are in these sort of habitual thought processes kind of continuing, how attached we are to them.
Yeah, I definitely think I did notice that there's something in it for me, in keeping people in the little boxes that I put them in.
Yeah.
So it takes a little bit of courage, doesn't it, to just let go of that a little bit.
Yeah, definitely.
Just a little something from George, who says, thank you for the invitation to the Monday sessions and for the warm welcome. This has been a really insightful and lovely practice.
Great. Yeah, that's good to hear, George. Yeah, very good to meet you across the screen. I hope to meet you in the flesh someday. I suppose the next stage would be meet you on screen, screen to screen, and then in the flesh. Yeah, but very welcome.
And hello from Shobit.
Shobit, hello, hi there. Our mutual friend Arthapuriya is going off on an ordination course on Monday, so just to keep you in the loop. Great, yeah. So I like this way of talking about self actually as habit. It's it's observable in experience. Sometimes you come across in Buddhism the sort of no self doctrine, and you can take it as a sort of metaphysical thing, but that's not really what's being got at. We just sort of add another idea on top of experience, actually, if we do that. Whereas if we think of it in terms of habit, that actually all self is a whole nexus of habits that we keep doing, and there are thoughts that go with those, that run with those. So there's a thought, a habitual sort of thought component. Well, then we can see it, and importantly, we can see how it's just sort of limiting our experience. That's what's interesting. We don't want to get too, what's the word, recriminative, recriminative about it, because of course that's going to be happening. We are the most important people in our lives. Of course that's going to be happening. So don't get recriminative about it, but let's just get interested in it. If we can get interested in it, we can go, ooh, we can actually sort of, in small ways, just step outside habit and see what happens. See how our experience can deepen when we just step off the self that we just repeating through our lives.
Sancha just put something in the chat. She says, thank you so much. So good to stop and let go. I found myself saying to my difficult person, may your losses be gentle.
That's lovely. That's a lovely, tender phrase, Sancha. Yeah, great. Yeah, it can be very, very interesting, can't it, when we... well, actually, we can get into a bit of a habit with meditation, can't we? The phrases, good as they are, there's a great value. We don't want to sort of jettison them too early. But we will get into a habit with our practice. So, yeah, sometimes just really taking a simplified approach, something like that can open up unexpectedly. Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing that, Sancha.
And a comment from Paul. Thank you. Helpful and insightful, and gives me a framework and tool to really work on those habits.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, great. That's great to hear, Paul. Yeah. Yeah, that's really what, that's in a nutshell what the Buddha's teaching is about, what the Dharma is about. It's a framework that just subtly sort of erodes habit, actually, so that we can go deeper and deeper into what it means to be alive. Yeah. Yeah, but it's good to have this sort of, to think in terms of self-development. Really important way of thinking about things, isn't it? Because we can develop self, we can get sort of more positive and more aware. And we don't want to get too fussy about that being selfish. Don't worry about that. But just from time to time, sort of counteract that with a sort of just keeping it really simple, going beyond habit in some small way and seeing what happens, seeing if that actually takes you deeper into the process of growth. Yeah. Anyway, I'm glad that was fruitful and insightful, at least for some of you. Yeah, we're just coming towards the end. I'm aware of Vidyasaki. I heard a little noise, so I was wondering if Vidyasaki was about to say anything. But no. So I'll go on. So, yeah, just before we finish, just to say a bit more about Meditation Night. You probably heard me say this before, but Meditation Night is very much a community. I think of it as a community sort of constellating. So you feel free to sort of get more involved or less involved as you like. You position yourself where you are in this sort of constellating community. But yeah, that's more how we see it as a community. It's not Meditation Night, it's not a service. And in Buddhism, generosity is at the heart of what community really means. So we just want to give these classes freely. That's what we do. So we don't personally want anything in return for them or expecting anything. We're not waiting. Yeah, and this is all part of, you could talk about it as spiritual death actually, stepping out of self. Generosity is a sort of stepping out of self-preoccupation in a very, very tangible way. Yeah, but that's at the heart of what Meditation Night really is. So one way of involving yourself more is participating in that spirit. It's as much an aspect of meditation as mindfulness of breathing is generosity. So if you want to participate, if you would like to, then do feel free to give a donation. There's also other ways in which you can get involved at the Buddhist Centre. Really, the Buddhist Centre is a big excuse for people sort of giving. It's just the co-creation of the sum total of all the people involved. And I mentioned the Monday morning practice. So Vidyasaki or Liz, can't remember which, will put a link in if you want to give a donation. And also for the Monday morning meditations. All of our programs just there to support you to develop a regular meditation practice. So I think that's all from us tonight. Thanks very much for coming.